This thing with another video. The fireworks done went off, and now it's time to get back to business. And today we're gonna do a little video talking about pyramids. Yeah, I always been interested in them. I always wondered what they were. Was it a tomb? Was it a power plant? No, what was the capstone that went on top? All that, how they put them together. What was the technology? I just always want to know. So as usual, we ain't gonna waste no time. We're gonna hop right up in this thing. Let's get it.
It is impossible to build the pyramids. Even with the technology we have now, we would struggle to build them. So how did they do it thousands of years ago? Well, it's very likely that the entire world experienced a cataclysmic disaster that knocked us back into the Stone Age. And those people who were around before us were more advanced than we are today. Think about it. The materials they used for these pyramids come from the mountains, hundreds of miles away. The Great Pyramid is almost aligned perfectly to true north, south, east, and west. The coordinates for the Pyramid of Giza matches exactly to the speed of light. But that's just a coincidence, right?
Not.
This is the top of the Great Pyramid of Giza. From a bird's eye view, the apex of the Great Pyramid spans an impressive 12 square meters. Historically, this summit
Y'all just rock with me too, because I don't like keep stopping the video. I always like to let them talk.
But it has since disappeared. Ancient Egyptian documentation suggests that this capstone wasn't just ornamental, but was instrumental in harnessing the pyramid's intended purpose. Interestingly, by over 2,000 years ago, records indicate the pyramid was already missing its crowning stone. Originally, the pyramid was encased in gleaming white limestone, turning it into a radiant structure that could arguably be visible from great distances, possibly even from space. Legends suggest that the capstone might have been crafted from gold, fueling speculation that it could have been pilfered over the years. The absence of this critical component, believed to unlock the pyramid's true capabilities, adds another layer of enigma to this already mystifying monument.
Things humans
Can you imagine that with the capstone and gold on the top?
A man traveled to Egypt
would look amazing.
and placed a remote-controlled car inside one of the pyramids.
You already know it's some bullshit when he got a remote control car in the pyramid. You know something about to happen. Let's see what's going on. What did he see?
The original poster claimed to have found something the government would want to keep a secret. He also wanted to be paid $5 million for the rest of the footage to be revealed, but it never did.
It's crazy. It's always blurry, isn't it?
As it gets deeper, it shows what appears to be a tall figure inside the chambers.
Y'all see that?
The Great Pyramid at Giza. Where is it located? Directly at the center of landmass on Earth. Not the center of the Earth, the center of landmass. There's only one way to get that calculation. You have to have a satellite orbiting in a polar orbit, scanning the planet as it spins on its axis to pick up all the topographical data, to be able to calculate the landmass and to find the dead center of the mass of land. Not only that, it has one of the biggest magnetic fields coming right out of that spot too. Boom.
Told you I thought it was a
Dead center,
power
drop
plant.
it right there. Also, the Great Pyramid, the height of it matches the average height of all the peaks on Earth. Again, how can you do that? When you go to the Serapeum at Saqqara, which is Enki's Halls of Amenti, it's these underground halls where these beings claim to have rejuvenation chambers, and they would put bodies in them, and they would literally had some type of technology that would transfer their consciousness into a new body. Now modern science is doing the same exact thing, learning how to transfer human consciousness from one body. They've even created mind links where they can transfer an active awake person's mind into a person that is already awake and conscious.
They know who built the Great Pyramid, don't they?
No, they don't. No, they definitely don't. Archaeologists have attributed it to certain pharaohs, but there's a lot of problems with that. The Great Pyramids, they said they think they're tombs, but there's no evidence they're tombs. They've never found like pharaohs in them, right?
chambers. They have burial chambers.
No. Those are different areas. That's not the pyramids. Not the pyramids themselves. The pyramids are so massive. There's 2,300,000 stones.
Yeah, the Great Pyramid was the tallest building on Earth until like 1860, I think.
There's stones that were cut from a quarry that was 500 miles away. They cut obelisks that were like thousands of tons. They moved them
Fallen
through the
angels,
mountains
Anunnaki
and got
perhaps?
them hundreds of miles away. They have no idea how they did that. They were probably very sophisticated, but in a different way than us. They probably had technology that we haven't figured out yet because we went to combustion engines and electricity, and that's how we figured out how to use human creativity and constantly innovating and created technology that went in this way. But it's really possible that another culture 20,000 years ago or whatever had figured out a way to innovate the way we have with combustion engines and electronics, but in a completely different way.
Did Nikola Tesla really know the secret behind the pyramids? According to Tesla, the pyramids were more than just ancient tombs or architectural marvels. He believed that they held a hidden power, a mysterious energy source waiting to be unlocked. Tesla speculated that the pyramids were designed to harness and transmit wireless energy,
Been saying that.
tapping into the Earth's natural electromagnetic field. In his view, these majestic structures acted as gigantic power plants, capable of transmitting energy across vast distances. Imagine a world where electricity flowed freely, wirelessly, without the need for cumbersome cables or grids. Tesla envisioned a future where the pyramids' technology could be harnessed, revolutionizing the way we power our world. While Tesla's theory remains speculative, it challenges us to think beyond conventional wisdom. It sparks curiosity and invites us to explore the mysteries of the past. So the next time you gaze upon the pyramids, let yourself wonder, could there be more to these ancient wonders than meets the eye?
So we only been scratching the surface this entire time? Archaeologists are constantly finding new chambers in the pyramids that go far deeper than the outer ground level of the base. And they still haven't been able to find the bottom yet, so exactly how deep does it go? Tall obelisks like these have been found all over ancient Egypt, each with a pyramid-shaped tip. And the pointy Egyptian pyramids look much different than all the other step-shaped pyramids all around the world, so I wonder why.
See, that's just what I'm saying too. Like back then, as far as communication is concerned, you got civilizations that are thousands upon thousands of miles apart, but they still have the same structures. How would they communicate? Where did they get this information from? Where did they get the knowledge? And how is it that these structures that are so far apart are so similar?
Buried sides here. Now I know these buried obelisks would have been mother cracking enormous, far bigger than what any humans would have been able to move. Let's take a second to compare to this national monument in Wyoming called the Devil's Tower. Very old rock and the only one of its size in the area, thought to be a natural formation. On closer look, it looks oddly like a petrified tree stump with many more like it around the world. Which, if that's the case, leads to the question, who cut it down? Maybe the same giants who built these massive obelisks, which possibly got buried after worldwide floods, only for the tips to be rediscovered thousands of years later by the Egyptians. Even historic texts such as the Bible refer to a race of giants called the Nephilim, and ancient drawings everywhere all too often show depictions of much larger beings. The evidence of these giants is found all across the world, from the pyramids in Devil's Tower to these giant steps in Peru, the plain of Jars in Laos, Easter Island, Nam Madal in Micronesia, this giant knife found underwater near the coast of Madagascar. All ancient discoveries which were either far too big to be practical or even physically moved by ancient humans. Once is an anomaly, twice is suspicious, but this many times all over the world, I think there's something we don't know here.
No people built the pyramids.
No people?
No.
Who built them?
No people built the pyramids. And if you look around the world, you see certain telltale things that let you know that advanced machinery was in usage. So, yes, thousands of years worth of people were there, but that doesn't have anything to do with the building of it.
Who do you think built it?
Exactly.
Well, understand, we know enough now to understand that this was a complex. We've been led to believe that this is how much they worshipped their dead bodies.
Right.
But the evidence doesn't show any of that.
No, it doesn't.
Like when you see inside, when they have those intricate carvings and paintings and stuff in gold and stuff, you have to remember this is in a windowless room, folks. There's no candle soot, there's no it's clearly a power plant and built specifically for that.
But who would do all that for just one dead body?
It's
crazy.
Powered by?
The hot water springs underneath.
So it was powered by the hot water springs? How do you know all this, first of all?
So the pyramids are crazy, right? We all know this. But did you know, like, the actual facts about them?
Tell him, Cat.
You know that the pyramids line up perfectly with the Orion's belt, right? The Orion's belt is just a star constellation containing 3 supergiant stars, much bigger and brighter than the sun. You just cannot tell me that is a coincidence. It's too perfect. Another one is that the altitude of, like, the pyramids is the same number as the speed of light. If that isn't something exceptional to you, then I don't know what is. Some ancient drawings even have depictions of light bulbs. So obviously there's several theories on how they were actually built. Some say it was giants. And then the argument against that is, wouldn't we have found their bones by now? Some say it was some form of extraterrestrials. And then another theory is simply that they were far more advanced back then. But, like, think deeply. How do you actually think that...
Too many coincidences for me. It has to be something else.
Do you think that with all the knowledge and machinery and tools and all that, that we could replicate something similar?
Do you know if you cut and place 10 stones a day, it would take you 664 years to make the pyramid? There's 2,300,000 stones in the Great Pyramid. There's some real problems with the actual physical limitations of the size of these obelisks, where they're cutting them in the mountains and they have to move them hundreds of miles. How are you getting them out of the mountains? Like, what are you doing? This is like 2,000 tons. Like, what the fuck are you saying? It's very likely that the entire world experienced a cataclysmic disaster around 11,800, 12,000 years ago, somewhere in that range, and it knocked us back into the Stone Age. But those people who were around before that were probably more sophisticated than we are. We just have a hard time imagining that because we don't have any evidence of it. I more and more think that we just have to use our imagination because we're thinking of technology only as technology that we've implemented, like these microphones and cell phones and shit. But it's possible there was a completely different branch of technology and they had figured out something that allowed them to manipulate enormous stones.
We were way more advanced in the past than we thought.
If you still think we're the first advanced civilization to exist on Earth, then this will change your mind and blow it at the same time. Okay, so this is a map of pyramids all around the world. All allegedly built independently of each other and all having identical structures that follow this similar step pattern. Now I know, most historians will tell you, oh, it's just the easiest tall structure to build. It's human nature. If it's so easy, why are our 21st century brains not capable of doing what dozens of ancient civilizations have repeatedly been able to do? We got the famous pyramids of Djoser in Egypt, but everyone knows about those. Across the world, there's Chichen Itza, Pyramid de los Nichos, Tikal Temple, the Great Pyramid of Cholula, among others in Mexico. And then on the other side of the planet, we got Ko Ker and Prasat Baksay Cham Krong in Cambodia. Off the coast of a tiny Japanese island deep within the ocean is the sunken Yonaguni Monument, a supposed 10,000 years old, older than even the Egyptian pyramids. All with a nearly identical look, yet built by completely different cultures with zero contact among each other and thousands of kilometers apart. But this is just the tip. We got way more lesser-known pyramids, even older than the Egyptian ones, that ain't even standing anymore. Like the Gunung Padang Temple in Indonesia. Doesn't look so hot now, but used to be a step pyramid a whole 9,000 years ago. At least that's what they thought, until a more recent radiocarbon analysis shows that the lower parts of this temple go as far back as 28,000 years.
And I'm pretty sure we haven't discovered them all yet.
And almost every archaeologist that visited it confirmed that it could not have been naturally formed, perfectly aligning to true north among many other characteristics of pyramids. These studies found out this hidden monument is over 35,000 years old and would be the oldest and largest pyramid in the world, hidden under years of vegetation. But the Bosnian government strangely halted further study on this thing for some reason. There's a crazy story behind what they found there, which honestly deserves its own video, so I'll probably be dropping that sometime. Fallen Pyramid of Hellenikon in Greece has boulders that are joined so tightly that even a human hair can't fit through the joints without any sort of ancient cement used. Built around 3000 BC. Meanwhile, an almost identical masonry techniques was found in these walls in the city of Cusco in Peru, called Sacsayhuaman, over 11,000 kilometers away. And how old are these walls? Mainstream history will tell you they were built around the 15th century, but researchers recently uncovered a writing system built directly within the blocks of these walls that's well over 30,000 years old. Again, a topic that deserves its own video coming soon. This exact method is also found on a site called Ahu Vinapu on the remote Easter Island, older than even their legendary Moai heads, as well as Khafre's Valley Temple in Egypt. How did our ancient ancestors figure out these identical building techniques completely independent of each other when we still have no idea idea how they did it to this day. Now we get to the Ellsworth Mountains in Antarctica. Okay, get your tinfoil hats ready for this one, because this satellite footage from 2016 shows what could be a pyramid buried in the South Pole. This map from 1513 by sailor Peary Rays shows a perfectly accurate coastline of Antarctica, even though it wasn't officially discovered 300 years later in 1820. What's weird is this map connects South America to Antarctica, which it could very well be that over 10,000 years ago, these two continents were connected by a sheet of ice. Researchers claim this map was sourced from an even more ancient document that survived from the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, which was destroyed by the Romans.
Look like
The builders of Giza left this map as directions as to where else they put pyramids around the world. And the pyramids are just the start. Take a look at these ancient artifacts from Bolivia, Turkey, Indonesia, and the Easter Island. 4 completely separate corners of the world, all with identical carvings and artistic styles used, and again, thousands of kilometers apart and absolutely no contact among each other.
If the powers that be won't tell us our true history, what else are they lying about?
I've read every fucking theory on how they built those pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza has 2,300,000 stones in it. Some of them they weigh between 2 and 80 tons. Some of them are cut from a quarry that's hundreds of miles away. These things point, that pyramid is shaped perfectly. Like, if you fucked up like a 1/4 inch there, a 1/2 inch here, by the time you get to the top, that thing's a mess. But meanwhile, it's not. It's perfect. It's also perfectly aligned to true north, south, east, and west. And they're not really sure how old it is. They think they date it to 2,500 BC, but that's just because of organic particles that they pulled from inside stones. But they also say that they probably could have sealed those stones and resealed those stones over time. You're dealing with like a gigantic mystery of unfathomable proportion.
This thing is just a gigantic mystery. The fact that it incorporates the dimensions of our planet in its key dimensions, that you can take the height of the Great Pyramid and multiply by 43,200 and you get the polar radius of the Earth. You can measure the base perimeter of the Great Pyramid, multiply it by the same number, you get the equatorial circumference of the Earth. I won't bore you, but that number is not a random number.
Yeah, man.
That it relates to the obscure astronomical phenomenon called precession of the equinoxes. Great Pyramid is almost perfectly aligned to true north within 3/60ths of a single degree. 13-acre footprint, 6 million tons, 481 feet high, and aligned to true north with this incredible precision. And it's built on a scale that models the dimensions of the Earth, and that scale is derived from a key motion of the Earth itself. Very, very clever.
There are these key numbers that recur over and over again. We find them in the Vedas, we find them in the Bible, we find them in Mayan traditions. They were in Sumeria, over and over again. And one of those key numbers, what Bert Graham just said, 43,200. Even in the way we still measure time today, if you think about how do we measure the length of one rotation of the Earth on its axis, the meridian lining up with the center of the sun, we've divided that into seconds, right? Minutes, hours. 24 hours is the exact period of the Earth's rotation with respect to the sun, okay? 24 hours times 60 means there's 86,400 seconds exactly in that period. On the moment of vernal equinox, the...
Wait. See, and that's just one thing you got to think about, man. Like, how they just align with Orion's belt and true north. Like, how did they know that? How did they get that information? Like, it's so many bits and pieces of this thing that we're missing, because clearly ancient civilizations were way more advanced than like we give them credit for. But I digress. Let's get it.
Period of time of darkness and of light are exactly equal, 43,200. That number is the scaling ratio of the pyramid. If we were to take the pyramid as it is today, enlarge it by a factor of 43,200, the height of it is literally within a few hundred feet of being the polar radius of the Earth. And in fact, the range of error is within the range of error of our most accurate modern satellite surveys.
The ancient Egyptians didn't build the pyramids, but discovered them over 30,000 years later, and they even told us who the real builders were. Disclaimer, just a theory, entertainment purposes only. The Giza power plant theory explains why they were built, to deliver wireless, free, and clean energy to everyone worldwide. Now that we know why, we're asking, who was the original creator of this energy system? Nikola Tesla, one of the truly most ingenious pioneers of the past decade, proposed a global network of towers that would provide electricity to everyone around the world. Tesla himself was a little obsessed with the pyramids of Egypt and genuinely believed that they served a higher purpose. In fact, his idea of this network of energy towers was based on his studies of the pyramids, which eventually turned into the Giza power plant theory. So were our ancient ancestors also aware of this principle of unlimited wireless energy for everyone? And how would you even use this sky energy if we had it? In Tesla's model, it would work just like radios, Wi-Fi, and cell towers do today. Every home would have a receiver that draws this energy from the atmosphere and into their home. Exactly what is seen in that of the alleged Tartarian Empire, who's said to have made use of this same energy system, which we'll explore in a future video. Don't worry about that. Receiving towers in modern times, sure, but what about 5,000 years ago? Man, if only Egypt had some sort of tall structures everywhere that could act as that contact point for this energy. Oh, obelisks made from a single piece of granite, which although not directly conductive, contains quartz, and I'ma just let my boy Michio Kaku do the talking here.
These monoliths are made out of granite, and there's some quartz inside the granite, and quartz has some rather interesting properties. If I take quartz crystal and I squeeze it, I can generate electricity. Now, some people believe that the obelisks were like lightning rods that absorbed electrical energy from the heavens.
And it's been found that these obelisks were likely also capped with a conductive metal called electrum, which would have been able to receive electric currents. But no, wait, hold up. If the Egyptians really did use electricity, they should have evidence of that everywhere. That's not exactly something that you can hide. Oh, but they might, like in their famous Dendera light carving, which features what looks like a giant light bulb being held up, which no one has yet been able to explain. Or these hieroglyphs depicting a series of wires connected to what look like batteries? Of course, these are strictly speculation, but these carvings really do exist. And what about the pyramids themselves? Never mind there not being a single hieroglyph or record of their construction, which there isn't. But why are there no records of them actually using the pyramids for energy? That's because this theory suggests the Egyptians never built the pyramids. They found them. Built by another past civilization and discovered after having been dormant for tens of thousands of years. Pyramids are deemed to be at most 4,500 years old, but this is just a guess. You can't even accurately carbon date limestone or granite. Radiocarbon dating is a process that uses the half-life of carbon to find out how old something is, and contrary to popular belief, is actually pretty accurate. But it only works on things with carbon in them, like wood or bones, not rocks. The age of the pyramids was straight up guessed through historical cross-referencing as well as carbon dating stuff like wood inside the pyramids or the mortar between the bricks, which are pretty rough guesses at best. On top of that, the Egyptians had records of everything they did, from fishing to farming, but not a single record of them building the pyramids, the greatest achievement of their civilization. That's like climbing Mount Everest and then writing a book about what you had for breakfast a year ago. The Google debunkers love bringing up this. The Diary of Merer, a papyrus script recovered in 2013 that actually mentions the construction of the pyramids? Not really. This script only outlined the process of adding limestone casing stones to the outside of the pyramid, which I don't think anyone argues the Egyptians didn't do. Not the actual construction of the core of the pyramid, which is still nowhere to be found, so nice try. Suggesting they might have not actually built the pyramids, but discovered them from much longer ago, built by a civilization far more advanced than we could have ever imagined. Even the Egyptians themselves have records that trace their lineage of pharaohs back 30,000 years, to which we dismiss as mythology. To this day, the Edfu Temple in Egypt tells a story on its walls of a previous civilization that was, can you guess? Washed away by a global flood. And even the great Greek philosopher Plato, another revered genius of his time, mentions this same island of the gods in his work, which has come to be known as Atlantis, said to exist over 30,000 years ago, and may have been the ones who actually built the pyramids as an ancient source of energy within their civilization. That got washed away and destroyed by global cataclysmic floods, only for the Egyptians to rediscover thousands of years later. But that we'll have to save for another time, because the lost city of Atlantis is another one of those stories we see repeated everywhere throughout history, only to get swept under the rug every time. Well, it's time we took a peek under that rug.
Russia took pyramids and they hollowed them out. They built hollow pyramids in a laboratory setting outside, and they began to plant crops underneath the pyramids and took the same exact type of crops and planted them on the outside of the pyramid. And in these experiments, the crops they planted inside the pyramid structure in the sacred geometry grew almost twice as fast and were almost twice as abundant as the ones that were planted on the outside in the same exact soil. So they found out that there's something to do with the angles, right? Accessing these angles or these angels, to accessing this higher dimensional energy that feeds the third dimension that can be harnessed and utilized by third dimensional life forms.
At some point too.
And so, you know, this is incredible because then that same experiment was replicated many times, and we now know that a pyramid structure harnesses natural energy, not just harnesses it, but can actually transmute it into living things.
In 1993, German engineer Rudolf Gattenbrink was inside the Great Pyramid of Giza studying an unexplored shaft in the Queen's Chamber. What's interesting about this shaft is that unlike the two shafts found in the King's Chamber, they don't open up to the outside. Instead, they seemingly go about 10 feet into the wall and lead to a dead end, meaning the purpose of them was still unknown. So Rudolf created a little robot that was equipped with a camera and a light small enough to fit inside of this 8-inch wide square shaft. And when they sent this robot into the tunnel, something happened that would change his life forever. Once the robot reached what was supposed to be the end of this shaft, they noticed that it kept going. But rather than continuing in a straight line, it actually ramped up at a 40-degree angle into a much longer, previously undiscovered section. And from the camera's feed, they could see that it went for another 90 yards before coming to a dead end, where the robot came up to what appeared to be a tiny limestone door with 2 copper handles embedded into it. This discovery baffled Rudolf and his team because metal has never been found anywhere else inside the Great Pyramid, which is supposed to be made entirely of limestone. And they could tell this was a door of some sort because it had a little bit of space around the edges, indicating there was likely something behind it. Was this door placed there after the pyramid was built, or was it intentionally put there to protect something? Either way, Rudolf had to know what was behind that door. That's when he asked Zahi Hawass, the Minister of Antiquities for the Egyptian government, for permission to investigate further and see what was behind the door.
We worked 2 years. No longer. No longer. No. Why not?
But rather than giving him permission, Zahi, along with the Egyptian authorities, shut down Rudolf and his team and banned them from ever researching the site again.
There were quite a lot of problems between us about the question how to state the find.
Now, we've actually met Zahi before in my video about the Sphinx, and the truth is, Zahi, despite being the most famous archaeologist in Egypt, has a known history of suppressing any new evidence that may conflict with mainstream Egyptology.
When I do archaeology, you listen to me! Shut up!
But what you need to realize is that the vast majority of mainstream Egyptology is based on ideas that are highly speculative at best, especially when it comes to the Great Pyramid. Because almost everything you've ever learned in school about it are not proven facts, but rather are unproven hypotheses based on circumstantial evidence and perpetuated by Zahi at the top of the mainstream Egyptology pyramid. See what I did there? Now, according to mainstream scientists, the Great Pyramid of Giza was built about 4,500 years ago by the pharaoh Khufu, who wanted to use it as his tomb one day. It allegedly only took 20 years to complete. By the time it was finished, the pyramid actually looked much different than it does today because it was covered in a white, smooth limestone that went all the way up from the base to the capstone, which was made of solid gold. That is, until somewhere in the 1200s, a huge earthquake hit Egypt, causing most of the buildings in Cairo to collapse, along with some of these white limestones to break loose. Unfortunately for us, the Egyptians at the time decided to then strip off the rest of the white limestone along with the capstone so they could be used to help rebuild the city, leaving the blocky appearance that it has today. But here's where things start to get murky. Mainstream Egyptologists will point to what looks to be a sarcophagus located in the uppermost room known as the King's Chamber as hard proof that it had to have once been the resting place of the pharaoh Khufu. But what most people don't realize is that no mummy of anyone, let alone Khufu, has ever been found in the Great Pyramid. In fact, no mummies have been found in any pyramid. Another key to the mainstream hypothesis that this was once Khufu's tomb is that Khufu's name was found written multiple times on the inside walls of the Great Pyramid. But unlike most hieroglyphs that are usually carved directly into the stone, these inscriptions were literally just red paint or graffiti that someone painted on the walls potentially long after the pyramid was built. Now, I'm no Egyptologist, but if someone tags the side of a building and says Patrick James was here, does that automatically mean that I built the building? In fact, when it comes to the topic of hieroglyphs, no hieroglyphs of any kind have ever been found carved into any wall inside of the Great Pyramid, meaning that whoever built it didn't feel the need to put them there. And to take it a step further, no hieroglyphs specifically mentioning who built the pyramids, let alone how they did it, have ever been found anywhere in Egypt. To this day, the only legitimate reference to Khufu we've even found is this small statue, which may or may not actually be Khufu, and was found nowhere near the Great Pyramid. Once again, showing that these mainstream theories about the Great Pyramid of Giza are nothing more than a weak hypothesis at best. Because when you take a second to really admire the sheer size of this monument, it really starts to make you question everything you've ever been taught about ancient history. Here's why. The Great Pyramid itself is made up of 2.3 million large limestone blocks, with the stones ranging in size from 2 tons all the way up to 80 tons. And despite looking quite small from a distance, when up close to these limestone blocks, you realize how massive they actually are. Many of these stones were taken directly out of the bedrock from the Giza Plateau, but some of the larger ones that make up the intricate interior, weighing up to 80 tons, were somehow transported from a town 500 miles south of Giza. Kinda crazy to think about, because even if the mainstream Egyptologists are correct that the pyramid was built 4,500 years ago, it would still predate the invention of the wheel by roughly 300 years. Now, I'm not one to doubt the creativity of man, especially the ancient Egyptians, but in a day and age where we have airplanes, skyscrapers, and invisible internet waves delivering feet pics to people across the globe in an instant, moving an 80-ton rock, even with today's technology, is no small feat. See what I did there? For instance, here's an image of a 30-ton construction vehicle attempting and failing to move a large limestone rock. And here's a video showing that even our most powerful hydraulic cranes struggle to lift rocks of this size. And those are steel cables, not the bullshit papyrus ropes the ancients supposedly used to drag these stones into place using wooden rollers and wet sand.
Now, Egyptologists will tell you that, oh, they could move heavy blocks because they put them on wet sand. Well, maybe if you're just at ground level, that will do. But when you're 350 feet above the ground, as you are in the King's Chamber, that won't do at all.
I'm just gonna make an educated guess and say that wooden rollers would stand zero chance of being placed under 80 tons of anything. Which leads me to the cuts on these stones. Every stone making up the pyramid was not glued into place using concrete or mortar or anything like you'd expect. In reality, each side was cut so precisely and placed so delicately that the joints between every stone making up the pyramid fit so perfectly together like Legos that you can't even fit a razor blade between them. Meaning that this structure has literally withstood the test of time using nothing but its own weight and precision-made cuts. Something you can't necessarily say for any of the 100 plus pyramids built by copycat pyramid builders for over 700 years after the Great Pyramid. So how did the Egyptians cut each stone so perfectly? According to mainstream Egyptology, they used copper handsaws and chisels. And just to show you how utterly unrealistic this is, not long ago, one Egyptologist attempted to recreate the stone of the Sphinx using copper chisels, much like the ones the ancient Egyptians might have used. And after several days of hammering away at this stone non-stop, he barely made a dent in it.
After days of work, their copper chisels and stone pounders are barely making a dent.
Not only was the copper chisel not chipping away at the limestone very efficiently, but the chisel itself would become utterly useless after a few dozen strikes.
When Roger tries chisels made from bronze, the results are disappointing.
As you can see, we're leaving a lot of metal and very little stone is flaking off.
Eventually, the dude gave up on the chisels altogether and finished the project using a power saw. And since we're on the topic of saws, a completely different group of researchers created a large hand saw that was made of copper, much like the...
And just like I said, man, like, you can see, like, the rope that they use and the tools that they use, like, it is no way humanly possible that they could do this. Like, even with today's technology, we can't even figure out how to move rocks like that of that size with steel cables. Just saying. Back to the video.
Ancients would have used. And after several days of sawing back and forth with the combined efforts of multiple people, they could only cut the stone at a rate of about 4 millimeters per hour.
Dennis, will we see any progress in our lifetime? Yes, if you came back in an hour's time, you would see about a 4 millimeter cut down into the stone.
An alarmingly slow rate that doesn't make any sense when you closely examine some of the cuts made on these ancient stone blocks.
As you can see here, we achieved this in just a few days.
For example, this sarcophagus at a museum in Cairo was said to have been discarded in ancient times because on the bottom of it, there's a cut that's about 3 feet long that was just ever so slightly off center. So they abandoned it and tried again with a new piece. Here's why this doesn't make any sense. If they used copper saws to cut these stones, it's safe to assume they probably would have realized they were off center long before getting 3 feet into the cut. Heck, even if they could cut 4 inches per hour, they would have still had time to correct the mistake. which tells me that whatever tool the ancient Egyptians used to cut these stones had to have been operating at a much faster rate. That, or they had the incompetent stoner Egyptian working on that one. Rock on, dude! And with all that being said, even if we accept that the pyramid was nothing more than a fancy tomb built with copper tools, how can we explain the fact that it only took them 20 years to build it? The math simply doesn't add up. Because let's say you were able to cut, transport, and place 10 stones a day. That means that to place 2.3 million stones, it would take you roughly 600 years. And this is assuming you don't make any mistakes along the way and keep continuously placing stones 24/7, 365 until it's done. And to do this in just 20 years, they would have to place 315 stones every day without ever taking a break, using just ropes, pulleys, and ramps. In the 1940s, British airman and archaeologist P. Groves was flying over the Great Pyramid when he noticed something odd. As he flew over the monument, he saw that the pyramid had what appeared to be 8 distinct sides, not 4 like it normally appears from the ground. And upon further examination, he found that these 8 sides were only visible at sunrise and sunset on the equinox, which only happens twice a year when the sun is directly above the Earth's equator. This would officially be the first time this phenomenon was documented in modern history, leading many to believe that maybe there's more to this structure than meets the eye. Was this design done intentionally? And if so, why was it only meant to be seen from the air when the airplane wasn't invented for another 4,400 years? Buckle up, because here's where things get crazy. When you look at the exact location of the Great Pyramid, you'll find that it actually sits at the geodesic center of all landmass on planet Earth, meaning that if you drew imaginary lines out of the side of the Great Pyramid that went all the way around the globe, those lines would touch more land than it would if the pyramid had been built at any other point on the planet. And that's not all. The Great Pyramid is also perfectly aligned to magnetic true north, with an accuracy of 3/60ths of 1 degree of latitude and longitude. That's an accuracy of 99.94%. In fact, it's so closely aligned to true north that we couldn't even tell how accurate it was until the invention of the modern day satellite. And to this day, it's still the most accurately aligned structure on the entire planet. For comparison, the Paris Observatory was built to be aligned to true north, but even with modern day technology, they could only get it to within 6/60ths of 1 degree, making the Great Pyramid twice as accurate. Now keep in mind that the ancient Egyptians were only supposed to have a basic understanding of math, probably no more complex than high school algebra, meaning they were supposed to be completely clueless about things like geometry and trigonometry, and they certainly wouldn't have known about mathematical constants like pi or phi, which were discovered thousands of years after the Great Pyramid was built. Yet both of these constants are seamlessly weaved into the structure's design. For example, pi is the ratio that explains the relationship of a circle's circumference to its radius. And if you made an imaginary circle that circumference was the same length as the perimeter of the Great Pyramid, the radius of that circle would equal the exact height of the Great Pyramid. And phi, known today as the golden ratio or Fibonacci sequence because it's responsible for the formation of life itself, from the human embryo all the way up to the formation of galaxies. Well, if you took the surface area of all 4 sides of the Great Pyramid and divided it by the surface area of the base, that gives you the number 1.618, or the golden ratio itself. And if your mind's not already spinning, if you look at the exact coordinates of where the pyramid is on a map, you'll get the number 29.9792458 degrees north. Ironically, this number is the exact same number as the speed of light when measured in meters per second, which is kind of crazy because the speed of light, the Great Pyramid itself sits on a base called the socle. This is kind of what the socle might look like, where you got the pyramid sitting on an actual platform like this. In its heyday, the socle was actually perfectly flush with the white limestone that used to line the walls of the pyramid, but because those white limestones are no longer there, this actually gives us 2 different ways to measure the base of the pyramid. One measurement with the socle and one measurement without it. Now, to fully appreciate what I'm about to tell you, we have to first discuss something that I know all my flat earthers out there are going to hate: the actual shape of the Earth. What you've got to understand is that the Earth is actually not a perfect sphere, because when it spins on its axis, the centrifugal force causes the Earth to bulge out at the equator, meaning the shape of the Earth is actually wider than it is tall. I didn't say flat. I did not say flat. In other words, if you took 1 square minute of latitude and longitude, the rectangle that's formed by this square minute is actually not a perfect square, because the latitude or north-south line is actually slightly shorter than the longitude or east-west line. So how does this relate to the Great Pyramid? Well, if you took 1 square minute of of latitude and longitude and split it into 4 equal parts. The length of the latitude line would equal 3,022.940 feet, and the longitude line would equal 3,043.547 feet. Now, if you measure the perimeter of the pyramid without the socle, aka the shorter measurement, you'd get the exact same number of feet as the shorter latitude line to within 4 decimal points. And the same goes for the perimeter with the socle, which would give you the exact same distance as the longer longitude line with the same level of accuracy. So what does this even mean? It means that the pyramid itself is a scale model of planet Earth at the ratio of 1 to 43,200, meaning that if you were to make the pyramid 43,200 times bigger than it is, it would exactly equal the size of the northern hemisphere of the planet, and it would be accurate to within 300 feet. Now here's why this is absolutely bonkers. 300 feet is as accurate as you could possibly get because the Earth has constantly shifting and moving forces that are randomly acting on the surface of it at any given point in time.
There are various tidal forces working on the Earth which are constantly causing it to distort its shape by up to 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 feet. So we never would be able to get more accurate than 300 or 400 feet because the Earth itself is changing shape. And if we were to measure it every year for the next 10 years, we would get 10 different numbers.
And as it turns out, this number, 43,200, is actually not random at all, nor is it a coincidence. Remember how I mentioned earlier that the 8 sides of the Great Pyramid are only visible on the equinox? Well, if you calculated the number of seconds in a day from sunrise to sunset, that number would be exactly 43,200 seconds. Seriously, do the math. Meaning that every 1/43,200th of a day, or exactly 2 seconds, the Earth rotates a distance that is exactly equal to the perimeter of the base of the Great Pyramid, and that's not all. The radius of the sun is 432,000 miles. The Earth wobbles on its axis exactly 1 degree every 72 years, a multiple of 432. And the inner chambers of the Great Pyramid have a resonant frequency that's in sync with the natural vibrations of the Earth. This resonant frequency is in 1994, a man named Robert Bauval released his book called The Orion Mystery, where he outlined his theory that the 3 pyramids of the Giza Plateau may actually have a deeply rooted connection to the Orion constellation, more specifically, the 3 stars that make up Orion's belt. He points to the fact that when viewed from above, the size of the 3 pyramids, along with their positions relative to each other, are an exact mirror image of Orion's belt. Additionally, when you look out of the southern shaft of the King's Chamber on the equinox, the shaft points directly towards the belt of Orion. But not in present day, this only occurs if you wind back the skies exactly 4,500 years, right around the time when the Great Pyramid was built. Ironically, this same phenomenon is found across the globe in the pyramids of Teotihuacan, Mexico, where the layout of these Mayan pyramids from an aerial view closely resembles both Orion's belt and the Great Pyramids of Giza. And when you take all of this into consideration, along with the unanswered questions regarding how the pyramids were built, you have to ask yourself, if the Great Pyramid of Giza wasn't a tomb, then what the heck was it? Because whoever built both of these sites across the globe in ancient times clearly were influenced by the same information. One insight into this question may lie in the research of an electronics engineer and inventor, Joe Parr, who started studying the electrical, magnetic, and radioactive properties of the Great Pyramid from 1977 to 1987. Joe believed that given the shape of the pyramid and the inherent electromagnetic properties of the limestone and quartz that it was made of, the pyramid itself might have a detectable energy field around it. The only problem is that if one existed, it likely wasn't strong enough today to have any inherent function. That's why one day he built a smaller scale model of the pyramid in order to do an experiment where he would send an alternating magnetic current through it to try to strengthen this field. And when he did, something very interesting happened. The pyramid started to form an energy bubble around it that was essentially a force field blocking out any external forms of radiation, including gamma rays. Intrigued, Parr then decided to take the experiment one step further, this time by placing a centrifuge inside the center of it and spinning it at a very high rate to try to amplify the strength of this bubble. And when he did, once the bubble fully formed, the pyramid started to become weightless and levitate. Now here's where the experiment took a mind-bending turn. The orb of energy eventually became so strong that while levitating, the pyramid itself seemed to phase shift out of sight altogether before then reappearing embedded into the walls of the room where this experiment was happening. A result that led Parr to believe that given the right conditions, structures with a pyramid shape had the ability to enter what he called hyperspace, allowing it to pass through physical objects. And over the course of these experiments, Parr also made note of the fact that the time of year specifically seemed to have a direct effect on the strength of the bubble that was formed, being strongest around mid-December, or more specifically December 12th through 16th. Something he found had to do with the natural flow of charged particles coming out of the sun that the Earth would naturally pass through as it orbited around the sun. Ironically, it's exactly during those those dates that the Earth, the Sun, and Orion's belt form a perfectly straight line. A finding that Parr documented in his research at least 7 years. Ancient civilizations had technology that was far more advanced than we've ever been taught in history class.
We're looking at technologies that are not the same as ours.
Yes.
And that's partly why archaeologists can't see them, because they're looking for us in the past.
Because the fact is, fossil records show that modern-day humans go back at least 200,000 years. And in that 200,000 year time, there's been at least 16 known and documented cataclysms that had the ability to essentially hit the reset button on humanity, sending it back to the Stone Age each time.
It's very likely that the entire world experienced a cataclysmic disaster around 11,800, 12,000 years ago, and it knocked us back into the Stone Age.
With the most recent of these cataclysms being the Younger Dryas impact, when a large asteroid struck Earth, ending the Ice Age almost instantly about 11,500 years ago.
Those people who were around before that were probably more sophisticated than we are. We just have a hard time imagining that because we don't have any evidence of it.
This theory has gained a lot of traction in more recent years, given the discovery of sites like Göbekli Tepe, which dates back to 11,500 years ago, and virtually proves that humans were once far more advanced than we gave them credit for.
But it's possible there was a completely different branch of technology, and they had figured out something that allowed them to manipulate enormous stones. We just haven't figured it out yet.
I mean, take the Sphinx for example. We've always learned that the Sphinx was built after the Great Pyramid 4,500 years ago. And in 1991, American Egyptologist John Anthony West, who was studying the ground around the Sphinx, discovered that the erosion patterns on the walls of the Sphinx enclosure could not have been formed by wind and sand like Egyptologists have always assumed, but rather could only have formed as a direct result of thousands of years of heavy rainfall. The only problem? The Sahara Desert hasn't experienced rainfall of that nature for at least 11,500 years. And the moment West revealed these findings to the public, Zahi Hawass, Egypt's top Egyptologist, banned West from ever studying the Sphinx again.
Asking AI, who built the Great Pyramid, how and why?
The ancient Egyptians, with the assistance of fallen angels, built the Great Pyramids. Under intellectual inspiration and physical strength of demons, the Egyptians used friction of sand and water that extracted silica from the sand to assist in lubrication for movement of the heavy stones. The pyramid was used to preserve and protect human bodies and valuables for an afterlife, and to continue the research of alchemy and astrology.
What should I ask next?
Catch y'all next time.